Johnny Harris stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of Richmond's most talked-about bistro Maison Bleu. Her dark brown eyes looked back at her with uncertainty. At 28, she'd spent most of her adult life putting everyone else first. Her father with his health problems, her younger sister through college, even her best friend Tasha's endless romantic emergencies. Tonight was supposed to be about her for once. "You can do this," she whispered, smoothing down the simple blue dress she'd bought 3 years ago for a cousin's wedding. It wasn't fancy, but it brought out the warmth in her complexion and made her feel pretty. She adjusted the small gold necklace that had belonged to her mother, a connection to the woman she'd lost too young. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tasha. "Don't you dare chicken out. Navy sweater. Table 7. He's cute. I promise." Journey took a deep breath. This blind date wasn't her idea, but after years of saying maybe next time to her own happiness, she'd finally run out of excuses when Tasha had cornered her at the bookstore where Journey worked. "One dinner," Tasha had insisted. "That's all I'm asking. Meet this guy, eat some food. If you hate it, I'll never set you up again." Now, walking through the restaurant with its warm lighting and sophisticated atmosphere, Journey felt out of place. This wasn't her world. Her world was paperback novels and quiet Sunday afternoons, reading on her small apartment balcony. Her eyes scanned the room and landed on table 7. A man sat there alone, wearing a navy sweater just as promised. His back was to her, but she could see broad shoulders and neatly trimmed dark hair. Taking another steadying breath, she approached. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I think I'm your blind date." When he turned, Journey's breath caught. He wasn't conventionally handsome in that perfect plastic way that made her uncomfortable. Instead, his face had character, intelligent eyes, a strong jaw with just a hint of stubble, and the kind of smile that seemed to hold secrets. "I was hoping it'd be you," he said, standing to pull out her chair. His voice was warm, with a hint of something she couldn't place. Relief, maybe, as if he'd been waiting not just tonight, but much longer. He was tall, well over 6 feet, making her feel small as she took her seat. "I'm Journey," she said, extending her hand. "Theo," he replied, his larger hand enveloping hers briefly. No last name offered, just Theo. There was an intensity to his gaze that made her want to look away, but she held his eyes. This was already uncomfortable enough without acting like a scared teenager. "So," she began, unfolding her napkin, "how do you know Rick?" She assumed that was their connection. Tasha's boyfriend must know this man. A brief flicker of confusion crossed his face, but he recovered quickly. "We've crossed paths through work. How about you?" "Oh, I'm Tasha's best friend. She's dating Rick, so..." Journey shrugged, relaxing a little. "I guess they decided we needed to meet." Theo nodded, a slight smile playing at his lips. "I guess they did." The waiter appeared, offering wine selections. To Journey's surprise, Theo asked what she preferred rather than ordering for them both. When she mentioned enjoying red wine, but not knowing much about it, he suggested a bottle that wasn't the most expensive on the menu, something she quietly appreciated. "So what do you do, Journey?" he asked after they'd ordered appetizers. "I work at Cornerstone Books. It's an independent bookstore downtown. Nothing glamorous, but I love it." She waited for the inevitable polite but dismissive nod that usually followed when she told people about her modest job. Instead, his eyes lit up. "What section would I find you in if I visited?" "Literary fiction, usually, though I have a secret weakness for historical romances." She hadn't meant to share that last part, but something about him made her want to be honest. "Any recommendations?" He leaned forward, genuinely interested. "Depends what you like to read." "Try me." Their conversation flowed from books to music, to places they'd visited. Journey found herself talking more than she had on any first date. What started as small talk evolved into something deeper when she mentioned visiting her mother's hometown last summer. "You're close with your mother?" he asked. Journey's fingers automatically went to her necklace. "She passed away when I was 15. Breast cancer." She rarely shared this with people she'd just met, but with Theo, the words came easily. This was hers. Theo's expression softened. "It's beautiful, like something from another time." It was her grandmother's, one of the few things she brought when she moved here from Jamaica. "Do you still have family there?" Journey nodded. "My aunt and some cousins. I try to visit when I can, but with Dad's health issues, it's hard to get away." She caught herself. "Sorry, that's probably more than you wanted to know." "No," Theo said quickly. "Please don't apologize for sharing your life. It's refreshing." Their main courses arrived, momentarily interrupting the conversation. When the waiter left, Theo picked up as if there had been no pause. "What health issues does your father have, if you don't mind me asking?" Most men would have changed the subject, steered towards something less heavy, but Theo seemed genuinely interested. Heart problems. He runs a small community health clinic in Jackson Ward, but he's terrible at taking care of himself. She smiled fondly. Classic case of the doctor who won't follow his own advice. A doctor who runs a community clinic? That's admirable work. It is. He could have joined a fancy practice years ago, but he believes healthcare shouldn't be a luxury. Pride filled her voice. The clinic barely breaks even most months, but he refuses to turn anyone away. Theo nodded thoughtfully. The world needs more people like your father. What about your family? Journey asked, realizing she'd been doing most of the talking. My parents died in a car accident when I was 22. It's just my younger brother and me now. He said it matter-of-factly, but she could see the shadow that passed over his face. I'm so sorry, she said softly. It was a long time ago, but it changed everything. He paused, taking a sip of wine. I had to step up for my brother. He was only 16 at the time. That must have been so hard. Theo laughed suddenly, breaking the somber mood. You want to hear something ridiculous? A few months after they died, I tried to cook a special birthday dinner for my brother. I'd never made anything more complicated than spaghetti. Journey smiled. Let me guess, disaster? Complete disaster. I set off the fire alarm. The cake collapsed. My brother came home to find me sitting on the kitchen floor surrounded by what looked like a crime scene of chocolate and flour. Journey laughed, a genuine laugh that surprised her. What did he do? He took one look at me, ordered pizza, and then helped me clean up. We ate store-bought cookies for dessert and called it a success. Theo's expression was warm with the memory. Sometimes I think he was the one taking care of me, not the other way around. As dinner continued, Journey forgot about being on a blind date. She forgot about feeling underdressed or out of place. She just felt seen. Theo asked questions about her life that went beyond polite interest. He listened when she talked about the novel she hoped to write someday. He told her about his work in tech, though he was surprisingly vague about specifics, saying only that he solved problems for a living. Hours passed without Journey noticing. They'd skipped dessert in favor of conversation, and the restaurant had grown quieter as other diners left. It wasn't until the waiter approached with an apologetic expression that she realized how late it had become. I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, but we'll be closing in 15 minutes, he said. Already? Journey checked her watch, shocked to see it was nearly midnight. I had no idea it was so late. Time flies, Theo said, smiling at her in a way that made her heart skip. When the check came, he reached for it without hesitation. Journey started to protest. She always insisted on splitting the bill, but he shook his head. Please let me. It's been the best evening I've had in longer than I can remember. The sincerity in his voice stopped her objection. Instead, she said, Thank you. I've enjoyed it too. As they prepared to leave, a flustered hostess approached their table, looking anxiously between them. Ms. Harris, she asked, addressing Journey. Yes? I'm so sorry for the confusion. Your blind date has been waiting at table 12 for over an hour. He's already left, but he asked us to give you this. She handed Journey a business card with a hastily scrawled note. Waited 45 minutes, not cool. Don't bother calling. Marcus. Journey stared at the card, then at the hostess, confusion washing over her. But I was told, table 7. Table 7 was reserved for Mr. Maddox, the hostess explained, gesturing to Theo. The name hit Journey like a physical blow. Theo Maddox. The reclusive tech billionaire whose company, Maddox Innovations, was constantly in the business news. The man who avoided public appearances and whose rare photos in the media showed him in expensive suits at formal events, not casual sweaters at neighborhood bistros. She turned to Theo, who was watching her with an unreadable expression. You knew, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You knew I was at the wrong table, and you let me stay. What had begun as a beautiful evening suddenly felt like a cruel joke. Why didn't you say something? Journey, I can explain. Explain what? That you let me sit here talking about my minimum wage bookstore job and my struggling father while you're... She stopped, embarrassment and anger fighting for dominance. While you're Theo Maddox. He reached for her hand, but she pulled back. The moment you sat down, I didn't want you to leave, he said quietly, urgency in his tone. Please let me... No. Journey gathered her purse, her cheeks burning. I don't need explanations from someone who thought it was funny to let me make a fool of myself all night. That's not what happened, Theo insisted, standing as she did. Journey, please. But she was already walking away, her vision blurred with tears of humiliation. How could she have been so stupid? She'd felt special, seen, understood, when all along she'd been nothing but an amusement for a bored billionaire. Journey! His voice followed her through the restaurant, but she didn't look back. Outside in the cool night air, she wiped angrily at her tears. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tasha. "How's it going with Marcus?" Journey ignored it, hailing a cab instead. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, she caught sight of Theo emerging from the restaurant, scanning the street for her. Their eyes met through the window for just a moment before the car turned the corner. That night, curled up in her bed, Journey replayed every moment of their conversation, now tainted by the knowledge that he'd been hiding who he really was. The worst part wasn't that he was rich or famous, it was that she'd trusted him, opened up to him, felt a connection that now seemed like nothing but a lie. "You let me speak like I mattered," she whispered into her pillow, "then made me feel like a mistake." Across town in his penthouse apartment with its panoramic view of Richmond, Theo Maddox stood at the window, still holding the business card the hostess had given him when he paid the bill. On it was Journey's full name and the address of Cornerstone Books. For the first time in years, he'd spent an evening as just Theo, not the CEO, not the billionaire, not the headline, just a man having dinner with a woman who saw him, really saw him. And he'd ruined it by not speaking up when he should have. "I have to fix this," he said to the empty room, already knowing it wouldn't be easy. What neither of them realized was that their accidental meeting was just the beginning. The universe had brought them together at the wrong table, but perhaps at exactly the right time. And sometimes, the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most extraordinary journeys. At Cornerstone Books the next morning, Journey arranged a display of new releases with mechanical precision, her mind still replaying last night's humiliation. The bell above the door jingled, and she looked up, her heart stopping when she saw who had entered. Theo Maddox stood in the doorway of her bookstore, no longer in a simple navy sweater, but in clothes that screamed wealth, a tailored jacket over a crisp shirt, designer jeans that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He looked like the billionaire he was, and completely out of place among the worn wooden shelves and second-hand books. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. He approached slowly, as if afraid she might flee. "I came to apologize and to explain. Please, Journey, 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." Around them, the few morning customers pretended not to stare at the famous man speaking to their favorite bookseller. Journey could feel her co-worker Eliza's curious gaze from behind the register. "I'm working," she said flatly. "I'll wait." He moved to a reading nook in the corner, selected a book from a nearby shelf, and sat down. Journey tried to ignore him, helping customers and shelving returns, but her awareness of his presence made her hands shake. After 20 minutes of this torture, she approached him. "Fine, 5 minutes. There's a coffee shop next door." Relief washed over his face as he stood, returning the book to its shelf with careful precision. "Thank you." Once seated at a small table away from other customers, Theo leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I never meant to deceive you, Journey. When you sat down at my table, I was surprised, but then you started talking, and you were so real. No agenda, no pretense. Do you know how rare that is in my life?" Journey remained silent, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. "I should have told you immediately about the mix-up," he continued, "but I was afraid you'd leave. And then we were talking, really talking, and it felt wrong to interrupt that. I wasn't laughing at you, Journey. I was grateful for the mistake that brought you to my table." "You could have told me who you were," she said quietly. "Would it have mattered? Would it have changed how you spoke to me, what you shared?" The truth was it would have, and they both knew it. "That's not the point," she insisted. "The point is you let me believe a lie." "Not a lie," he countered. "An omission. Everything I told you about myself was true. My parents, my brother, my work, all true. I just didn't include my last name or my bank balance." Journey shook her head. "It's not that simple, and you know it." She stood, gathering her purse. "Thank you for the apology, but I need to get back to work." "Journey," his voice stopped her. "I'd like to see you again." She turned back, incredulous. "Why, because I'm some novelty?" The bookstore girl who didn't recognize the great Theo Maddox. Pain flashed across his face. "Because for one night, I wasn't the great Theo Maddox. I was just a man having dinner with a fascinating woman. Because when you talked about your father's clinic and your writing dreams, I cared. Because when I told you about my brother, you listened without calculating how that information could benefit you." His sincerity gave her pause, but the wound was still too fresh. "I can't, I'm sorry." As she walked away, Theo called after her, "I'll respect your decision, but Journey, for what it's worth, sitting across from you was the most honest I've felt in years." She didn't turn around, didn't let him see how his words affected her. Back at the bookstore, she buried herself in work, ignoring Eliza's curious questions about that gorgeous man who was definitely Theo Maddox, am I right? The next day, a delivery arrived at the bookstore, a rare first edition of Journey's favorite novel, one she'd mentioned during dinner. There was no note, no sender information, but she knew who it was from. She instructed Eliza to place it in the store's collection, not accepting it as a personal gift. 3 days later, Journey's father called, his voice confused but happy. "The strangest thing happened, honey. Someone made an anonymous donation to the clinic. $50,000 just like that. New equipment, medication supplies for a year. All covered." Journey's stomach dropped. "Dad, did this donation come through the Maddox Foundation by any chance?" "How did you know?" "They asked to remain anonymous, but yes, that's the organization that processed it." She closed her eyes, a mixture of gratitude and frustration washing over her. The money would help so many people, including her father, but it also felt like Theo was trying to buy his way back into her good graces. A week after their disastrous dinner, Journey was shelving books in the classics section when she noticed something odd about a copy of Pride and Prejudice that had been returned that morning. Opening it, she found writing in the margins, elegant handwriting she didn't recognize. Next to the famous first line, "It is a truth universally acknowledged," someone had written, "It is also a truth that sometimes the most meaningful connections begin with misunderstandings." Flipping through the pages, she found more notes, personal reflections on the text that somehow seemed meant for her eyes. On the last page was a simple message: "Some mistakes are worth making. TM." Journey closed the book, pressing it against her chest. Despite her resolve to forget Theo Maddox, she found herself smiling. What she didn't know was that this was just the beginning. Theo had no intention of giving up easily, not when he'd finally found someone who made him feel like more than his bank account or his business acumen, not when he'd found Journey, and somewhere in Richmond at a table meant for two, fate was already planning their next encounter. 2 weeks had passed since the night at Maison Bleue, and Journey Harris was doing her best to forget Theo Maddox. She'd returned to her routine, working at the bookstore, visiting her father at the clinic, and spending Friday nights with Tasha watching old movies. She had explained the mix-up to her friend, who couldn't stop talking about the cosmic coincidence of Journey accidentally sitting with one of America's most eligible bachelors. "It's like something out of a movie," Tasha had said for the 100th time as they shared Chinese takeout in Journey's small apartment. "And he wants to see you again. How are you not jumping at this chance?" "Because it's not real," Journey replied, stabbing at her noodles with her chopsticks. "Men like Theo Maddox don't end up with women who work in bookstores and live in apartments with leaky faucets." "But drop it, Tasha, please." Despite her firm words, Journey couldn't stop thinking about him. Every time the bell above the bookstore door jingled, her heart would leap, only to sink when it wasn't him. She told herself it was relief, not disappointment. What she didn't tell Tasha was about the books. They kept appearing, classics and contemporary novels, always with notes in the margins, always returned to the store as if they'd been borrowed, always finding their way to her. In The Great Gatsby, beside a passage about Daisy's voice being full of money, Theo had written, "Some of us would trade all the money for a voice that speaks truth." In Their Eyes Were Watching God, next to a line about love, he'd scribbled, "Is it possible to know someone in a single evening? I'm beginning to think it is." Journey had started collecting these books, taking them home instead of reshelving them, telling herself it was to prevent customers from seeing the writing. But at night, she would trace his handwritten words with her fingertips, wondering what it meant that a billionaire was courting her through literature. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the clinic called. Her father had collapsed during a patient consultation. By the time Journey arrived at Richmond Memorial Hospital, Dr. William Harris was already in a private room, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him against the white hospital sheets. "It's nothing, baby girl," he insisted when she rushed to his side. "Just a little scare." But the doctor told a different story when Journey cornered him in the hallway. Her father needed bypass surgery, and soon. The procedure was covered by his insurance, but the recovery would be long. The clinic would have to close temporarily, which meant no income. "Dad, why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" Journey asked, returning to his room with forced composure. "You have your own life to worry about. I didn't want to be a burden." He patted her hand. "Besides, we've been through worse, haven't we?" She nodded, thinking of the dark days after her mother died, when they'd clung to each other through grief. "We'll figure it out," she promised, not sure how. That night, alone in her apartment, Journey did the math. Her bookstore salary wouldn't cover both her rent and her father's mortgage. She could move in with him during his recovery, but that still left bills, medications, and the clinic's overhead costs. Her small savings would be gone in a month. A knock at her door startled her out of these grim calculations. It was nearly 10 p.m., too late for casual visitors. Looking through the peephole, she gasped. Theo Maddox stood in her hallway, his tall frame tense with concern, rain dampening his expensive coat. For a moment she considered pretending she wasn't home, but something in his expression made her open the door. "How did you find out where I live?" she asked, not inviting him in. "Tasha told me about your father," he said, ignoring her question. "I went to the hospital, but you'd already left. I wanted to make sure you were okay." The genuine worry in his eyes broke through her defenses. She stepped back, allowing him to enter her modest apartment. She was suddenly aware of the mismatched furniture, the stack of library books by her reading chair, the general smallness of her life compared to his. "It's nothing fancy," she said defensively. Theo looked around, not with the judgment she feared, but with curiosity. "It's you," he said simply, stopping at her bookshelf. "I like it." Journey crossed her arms. "Why are you really here, Theo?" He turned to face her, all pretense gone. "I want to help. With your father, the clinic, whatever you need." "I don't want your money," she said sharply. "I know." He smiled slightly. "That's one of the things I like about you. But this isn't about what you want. It's about what your father needs. The clinic serves, what, 1,000 patients? Closer to 1,500, she corrected. 1,500 people who might not get care elsewhere. He stepped closer. "Let me help, Journey. Not as a billionaire throwing cash around, but as someone who cares about what you care about." She wavered, thinking of her father, of the clinic patients, of the impossible numbers on her notepad. What kind of help? For starters, a healthcare management team to keep the clinic running while your father recovers. No strings, no publicity, no Maddox name anywhere near it. "And what do you get out of this?" she asked, still suspicious. Theo's expression softened. "Maybe a chance to prove I'm not just a bank account with legs. Maybe the opportunity to show you that the man you had dinner with, the real me, is someone worth knowing." His vulnerability pierced her armor. Before she could respond, her phone rang. The hospital. Her father's condition had worsened. They were preparing him for emergency surgery. "I have to go," she said, grabbing her purse with shaking hands. "I'll drive you," Theo offered, and this time she didn't argue. The next 12 hours were a blur of hospital corridors, coffee cups, and hushed consultations with doctors. Throughout it all, Theo stayed. Not hovering, not taking over, just present. He brought her food she didn't eat, made calls to her boss at the bookstore, and sat silently beside her in the surgical waiting room. When the surgeon finally appeared with news that the operation had been successful, Journey sagged with relief. Theo's arm went around her shoulders, and she leaned into him without thinking. "Thank you," she whispered, "for staying." "There's nowhere else I would have been," he replied, and she believed him. In the days that followed, Journey was too busy with her father's recovery to overthink what was happening with Theo. True to his word, he arranged for the clinic to remain open, staffed by qualified doctors who owed him a favor. He never mentioned money, never made her feel indebted. Instead, he brought coffee when he visited the hospital. He listened to her father's stories about growing up in Richmond. He even endured William Harris's suspicious questioning about his intentions toward my daughter. "Dad, stop embarrassing me," Journey had protested, but Theo had answered seriously. "My intentions are to know her better, sir, if she'll let me." A week after the surgery, Journey's father was discharged. Theo helped move him into his home, carrying bags and setting up the bedroom for maximum comfort during recovery. As they worked side by side, Journey found herself watching Theo, the way he listened attentively to her father's instructions, the gentleness with which he handled her mother's photographs, the complete absence of the arrogance she'd expected from someone of his status. That evening, as they sat on her father's porch swing, exhausted but satisfied with the day's work, Journey finally asked the question that had been haunting her. "Why me, Theo? You could be with anyone. Models, actresses, women from your world." He was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the darkening street. "Do you know what my life was like before that night at the restaurant?" Journey shook her head. "Lonely," he said simply. "I have everything money can buy and almost nothing that matters. My brother is in Europe most of the year. My friends, if you can call them that, are business associates who want something from me. The women I meet," he shook his head, "they see Theo Maddox, CEO, bank account, magazine cover, not me." He turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the porch light. "But you sat down at my table and just talked to me about books and family and dreams. You weren't impressed when I mentioned my company. In fact, you looked a little bored." Journey laughed despite herself. "I did not." "You did. You were more interested in telling me about that novel you're writing than hearing about my tech projects." He smiled. "It was refreshing. You're refreshing, Journey Harris, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since." His honesty left her speechless. Before she could formulate a response, her father called from inside, needing help with his medication. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them. The next morning, Journey arrived at her father's house to find a stack of groceries on the porch and Theo in the kitchen attempting to make breakfast. "What are you doing?" she asked, amused by the sight of him frowning at a carton of eggs. "Trying to remember that cooking tutorial I watched online last night," he admitted. "I thought your dad might like something homemade instead of hospital food." "You watched a cooking tutorial?" The idea of Theo Maddox, tech genius, studying how to fry eggs was oddly endearing. "Don't sound so surprised. I'm a quick learner." As if to prove his point, he cracked an egg into the pan with exaggerated care. "See? Perfect." It wasn't perfect. The yolk broke and ran across the pan, but his proud expression made Journey laugh. "Move over, Gordon Ramsay," she teased, taking the spatula from him. "Let me show you how it's done." They worked together, Journey teaching and Theo following her instructions with the same focus he probably gave to multi-million-dollar business deals. By the time her father appeared in the doorway, they had managed a respectable breakfast of scrambled eggs, toast, and fruit. "Something smells good," William said, eyeing them with a knowing look that made Journey blush. "Theo made breakfast," she said quickly. "With considerable help," Theo added, pulling out a chair for William. "How are you feeling today, Dr. Harris?" As they ate, Journey watched the easy rapport developing between her father and Theo. They discussed everything from local politics to fishing spots, with no mention of wealth or status. It struck her that Theo seemed more comfortable here, in her father's modest kitchen, than he had in the upscale restaurant where they'd met. Later, while her father napped, Journey found Theo on the back porch, reading one of her father's medical journals with apparent interest. "You don't have to stay, you know," she said, joining him. "I'm sure you have a company to run." "I do," he agreed, setting down the journal. "But I have good people who can handle things for a few days. Right now, this feels more important." "What does?" "Babysitting us. Being here. Being useful." He hesitated. "Being with you." The simplicity of his answer caught her off guard. "I don't understand you, Theo Maddox." "What don't you understand?" "Why you're here, making breakfast and reading medical journals, when you could be doing, I don't know, billionaire things." He laughed. "Billionaire things, like swimming in a vault of money? Sorry to disappoint, but my life isn't that exciting. Most days I'm in meetings or looking at spreadsheets." "But you have options," she persisted. "You could be anywhere, doing anything. And I choose to be here." He reached for her hand, his fingers warm against hers. "Is that so hard to believe?" Before she could answer, her phone rang. The clinic, with questions about a patient's records. As she handled the call, Theo watched her with admiration. Her competence, her dedication to her father's work, these were things money couldn't buy. That evening, after ensuring William was comfortable for the night, Theo walked Journey to her car. The air between them felt charged with unspoken words. "Thank you," she said finally, "for everything you've done for my dad, for the clinic. You don't need to thank me." His voice was low in the darkness. "But there is something you could do for me." "What's that?" "Have dinner with me again. A real date this time. No mistaken tables, no hidden identities. Just us." Journey hesitated, all her doubts resurfacing. "Theo, I don't belong in your world." "Then we'll create our own." He stepped closer. "Table 7 at Maison Bleue, Friday at 7. A second chance at a first impression." The invitation hung between them, weighted with possibility. Part of her wanted to refuse, to protect herself from the inevitable moment when reality would intrude on this strange connection they'd formed. But another part, the part that had spent the last week seeing a different side of Theo Maddox, was tired of saying no to her own happiness. "Okay," she said finally. "Friday at 7. His smile was worth the risk. "I'll be waiting for you." The days until Friday passed quickly, filled with her father's care and work at the bookstore. Theo called daily, but kept his distance, as if giving her space to reconsider. She appreciated that he didn't push, didn't try to overwhelm her with grand gestures. When Friday arrived, Journey found herself standing once again in front of her closet, wondering what to wear. The blue dress from their first meeting seemed appropriate somehow, a symbol of coming full circle. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tasha. "Wear the blue dress. He won't be able to take his eyes off you." Journey smiled, wondering when her best friend had become Theo's cheerleader. At 10 minutes to 7, Journey's taxi pulled up outside Maison Bleue. Through the window she could see table 7, where Theo already waited, wearing not an expensive suit but a simple navy sweater, the same one from their first meeting. The sight made her heart catch. Inside, the hostess recognized her immediately. "Miss Harris, welcome back. Mr. Maddox is waiting for you." This time there was no mistaking where she belonged. As she approached table 7, Theo stood, his eyes lighting up at the sight of her in the blue dress. "Are you came?" he said, as if he'd half expected her to change her mind. "I came," she confirmed, taking her seat, "though I'm still not entirely sure why. Because despite your better judgment, you like me," he suggested, with a teasing smile. "Don't push your luck, Maddox." Their banter came easily, the awkwardness of their circumstances fading as they fell back into the connection they'd found that first night. This time, however, there were no secrets between them. Theo spoke openly about his work, his wealth, the realities of his position. Journey shared her insecurities about their differences, her fears that they lived in worlds too far apart to bridge. "I think you're overthinking this," Theo said, as they finished their main course. "We're just two people who enjoy each other's company. The rest is details." "Pretty significant details," Journey countered. "Only if we let them be." He reached across the table for her hand. "Journey, when I'm with you, none of that matters. For the first time in years, I feel like myself, not some cardboard cutout of Theo Maddox, tech billionaire. Can't we just see where this goes?" His honesty was disarming. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of you, but of feeling this way about someone so different from me." "Different how?" "We like the same books. We both put family first. We both hate olives." He gestured to the olives she'd picked out of her salad, making her laugh. "Seems to me we have the essentials in common." As they shared dessert, a chocolate cake that Theo insisted was not as good as the one I burned for my brother, Journey felt herself relaxing into the possibility of them. Maybe he was right. Maybe the external differences didn't have to define them. After dinner, they walked along the riverfront, the city lights reflecting on the water. Theo kept a respectful distance, though Journey found herself wishing he would take her hand again. "Tell me more about your book," he said as they paused to watch a boat pass. "The one you're writing." Journey was surprised he remembered. "It's nothing special, just a story about a woman finding herself after loss." "Based on your experience with your mother?" She nodded, touched that he'd made the connection. "After she died, I felt lost for a long time. Writing helped me make sense of it. I'd like to read it someday," he said, "if you'd let me. It's not finished. It might never be." "Because of time or courage?" His perception startled her. "Both, I guess. Working at the bookstore, helping Dad with the clinic. There's never enough hours. And then there's the fear that it's not good enough, that I'm not good enough." "You are," Theo said with such conviction that she had to look away. "More than good enough, Johnny." The intensity of his gaze made her change the subject. "What about you? Any secret hobbies the business magazines don't know about?" He laughed. "Nothing as meaningful as writing, though I do build model ships." "Model ships?" She couldn't hide her surprise. "My grandfather taught me. It requires patience, precision." He shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "It helps me think." This glimpse of his private self, of the boy who built models with his grandfather, touched her more than any grand revelation could have. It made him human, relatable in a way his wealth never could. As the evening wound down, Theo walked her to her car. This time, the silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. "I'd like to see you again," he said as they reached her vehicle. "Maybe somewhere less formal. I could cook for you." He grinned, or attempt to, anyway. Journey couldn't help but smile at the thought of Theo in an apron, fighting with eggs again. "I'd like that," she admitted. He stepped closer, and for a moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather-light. "Good night, Journey Harris. Thank you for giving me a second chance." "Good night, Theo." She got into her car, her skin still tingling where his fingers had brushed her cheek. As she drove home, Journey tried to make sense of her feelings. She'd gone from embarrassment to anger to grudging gratitude, and now to something that felt dangerously like falling. But the rational part of her brain kept issuing warnings. Men like Theo didn't end up with women like her. This would end, and probably badly. What she didn't know was that across town, Theo was having his own internal debate. Sitting in his penthouse, He held a small velvet box, a gift he'd considered giving Journey tonight but had decided against, fearing it was too much, too soon. Inside was a delicate gold bookmark, engraved with words from the book they'd discussed on their first meeting. What is essential is invisible to the eye. He placed the box in his desk drawer, smiling at the thought of her reaction when he eventually gave it to her. For the first time in his adult life, Theo Maddox was thinking about a future that had nothing to do with business acquisitions or stock prices. A future that somehow had come to include a bookstore employee with a beautiful smile and eyes that saw past his wealth to the man beneath. What neither of them realized was that their cautious steps toward each other were being watched with calculating eyes. Alexander Reed, Theo's chief competitor and longtime business rival, had recognized him at Maison Bleue that night, and now with a few keystrokes, he was learning everything there was to know about Journey Harris, the daughter of a struggling doctor, working in a bookstore, living paycheck to paycheck. Well, well, Alexander murmured to himself, studying a photo of Journey and Theo leaving the restaurant. Isn't this an interesting development? In his experience, everyone had a price, and finding Journey Harris's might be the key to finally gaining an advantage over the untouchable Theo Maddox. All he needed was the right moment, the right approach. As Journey settled into bed that night, reading one of the books Theo had annotated for her, she had no idea that her simple life was about to become considerably more complicated, or that the greatest test of their newfound connection was just beginning. At her father's house, William Harris sat at his desk, reviewing the clinic's books with growing concern. Despite the anonymous donation, despite the temporary staffing help, the fundamental problems remained. The building needed major repairs, equipment needed updating, and their patient load continued to grow beyond their capacity. He didn't want to burden Journey with these worries, especially now that she seemed happier than he'd seen her in years. But the reality was inescapable. Without significant, sustained funding, the Jackson Ward Clinic would have to close its doors by the end of the year. William rubbed his tired eyes, wondering what his late wife would advise. She had always been the optimistic one, believing that when one door closed, another would open. Looking at the photo of her on his desk, he whispered, "I could use one of those open doors right about now, Marie." Little did he know, forces were already in motion that would either answer his prayer or destroy his daughter's chance at happiness. Perhaps both. Spring had given way to summer in Richmond, bringing humid days and warm nights that seemed to stretch endlessly. For Journey, the past month had unfolded like a dream, one she was afraid to fully believe in. Her father was recovering well, back to working part-time at the clinic. The mysterious healthcare management team Theo had arranged continued to keep things running smoothly, though William Harris had started asking questions about when their assistance would end. "Nothing is free in this world," he'd told Journey over Sunday dinner. "I appreciate what your young man has done, but I need to know what strings are attached." "There aren't any strings, Dad," Journey had insisted, though the phrase "your young man" had made her cheeks warm. "Theo doesn't work that way." Her father had given her a knowing look. "Everyone works that way, baby girl. Even good people, especially rich people." Despite her father's concerns, Journey found herself falling deeper into a relationship with Theo. It had started slowly. Dinner at his penthouse, where he'd proudly served a pasta dish he'd learned to make, weekend afternoons spent showing him her favorite spots in Richmond, quiet evenings reading together in comfortable silence. To her surprise, Theo fit into her world more easily than she'd expected. He seemed genuinely interested in the neighborhood bookstore events, asked thoughtful questions about her father's patients, and never complained about her small apartment or simple lifestyle. If anything, he seemed to relish the normalcy of it all. "You're staring again," Journey said, without looking up from her book. They were sitting on her tiny balcony, enjoying the evening breeze. "Can't help it," Theo replied, not bothering to deny it. "You're beautiful when you're concentrating." She rolled her eyes but couldn't stop her smile. "Flattery will get you nowhere, Maddox." "Evidence suggests otherwise," he countered, reaching across to take her hand. This easy intimacy still startled her sometimes, the way his fingers linked with hers, the casual touches that had become part of their routine. They hadn't moved beyond kisses yet, both seemingly content to let their relationship build slowly, but those kisses had grown more intense, leaving Journey breathless and wanting more. "What are you thinking about?" Theo asked, noticing her distraction. "Nothing," she lied, withdrawing her hand to turn a page. He leaned forward, gently taking the book from her hands. "Journey Harris, you're a terrible liar." "I'm thinking about how surreal this is," she admitted. "You, Me, this, whatever we're doing. I believe the technical term is dating, he said with a smile that faded when she didn't return it. What's wrong? Journey sighed, unable to articulate the fear that constantly lurked at the edges of her happiness. Nothing's wrong. It's just, when does reality kick in? When do we admit that this can't last? Theo's expression grew serious. Why can't it last? Because we're from different worlds, Theo. Because eventually you'll need to go back to board meetings and charity galas and women who know which fork to use at fancy dinners. First of all, he said, taking her hands in his, I hate those galas. Secondly, I couldn't care less about forks. And most importantly, there's no going back for me. This, us, is where I want to be. The certainty in his voice made her want to believe him. But experience had taught Journey that happiness came with expiration dates, especially for people like her. You say that now, but no buts. He cut her off gently. I know what I want, Journey. I've known since that first night at Maison Bleue. The question is, what do you want? It was a fair question, one she'd been avoiding. What did she want? The safe answer was what she'd always had. Her quiet life, her books, her family. But the honest answer terrified her, because it included the man sitting across from her, looking at her like she was the most precious thing he'd ever found. I want, she began, but was interrupted by her phone ringing. It was Eliza from the bookstore calling with an emergency. A pipe had burst, flooding part of the shop. I have to go, Journey said, already gathering her things. I'll drive you, Theo offered, and they were out the door in minutes. The scene at Cornerstone Books was worse than Journey had feared. Water covered the floor, and several shelves of books had been soaked. The elderly owner, Mr. Finch, was trying valiantly to salvage what he could, but the devastation was clear on his face. Oh, Mr. Finch, Journey said, rushing to help. How bad is it? Bad enough, he replied grimly. Insurance will cover some, but he shook his head. This might be the push I needed to finally retire. Journey felt her heart sink. Cornerstone Books wasn't just her workplace, it was her sanctuary. The thought of it closing was like losing a piece of herself. To her surprise, Theo stepped forward. Mr. Finch, I'm Theo Maddox. What if I told you we could have this fixed by next week? New floors, repaired plumbing, even better shelving. The old man looked skeptical. That would cost a fortune and take months. Not necessarily, Theo said. I know some people who owe me favors, good contractors who work fast. Journey watched this exchange with mixed emotions. Part of her was grateful for Theo's offer to help, but another part worried about Mr. Finch becoming another charity case. Theo, she said quietly, pulling him aside, you can't just throw money at everything. Why not? He asked, genuinely confused. I have it. The store needs it. It's a simple equation. Because, she struggled to explain, because it makes everything unequal. You give, we take. Eventually that creates resentment. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Is that what you think is happening between us? That I'm buying your affection? No, she said quickly, though a small voice inside her wondered if that was exactly what she feared. But this is different. This is my job, my independence. Theo considered her words. What if it wasn't charity? What if it was an investment? What do you mean? Mr. Finch wants to retire, right? What if someone bought the bookstore, kept it running, kept you employed, but provided the capital for improvements? Journey stared at him. You want to buy Cornerstone Books? Not me personally, he clarified, but I have a foundation that supports small businesses. It could provide a loan to someone who wanted to take over, someone who knows books, who cares about this place, someone like you. The idea was so unexpected that Journey couldn't form a response. Her own Cornerstone Books? It was a dream she'd never allowed herself to consider. Think about it, Theo said, seeing her hesitation. No pressure, but don't dismiss the idea just because it came from me. Before she could reply, Eliza called her over to help with a particularly damaged section. For the next few hours, they worked to salvage what they could, setting up fans to dry the floor and creating an inventory of lost merchandise. Throughout it all, Theo worked alongside them, his expensive clothes getting soaked and dirty as he moved heavy shelves and carried boxes of wet books. He didn't complain once, didn't act like the work was beneath him. By the time they finished for the night, even Mr. Finch had warmed to him. Your young man's a hard worker, the old bookseller told Journey as they locked up, and he might be right about this being a good time for changes. Exhausted and damp, Journey and Theo drove back to her apartment in comfortable silence. It wasn't until they were at her door that she spoke. Thank you for helping tonight. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to, he said simply. That's what people do when they care about each other. She studied his face, still trying to reconcile the billionaire from the headlines with the man who had spent hours saving waterlogged books because they mattered to her. "About what you said, the investment idea, we don't have to talk about it now," he assured her. "Just promise you'll consider it, not as a favor to me, but as an opportunity for yourself." She nodded, then rose on tiptoes to kiss him goodnight. What started as a gentle thank you deepened into something more, a wordless communication of growing feelings neither was quite ready to name. When they finally broke apart, Theo's eyes were dark with emotion. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "You could stay," Journey offered, surprising herself. "Just to sleep," she added quickly. "It's late and you're exhausted." The invitation hung between them, weighted with significance. This would be a first, crossing the threshold from dating to something more intimate, even if they were just sleeping. "Are you sure?" he asked. In answer, she took his hand and led him inside. That night, lying in her bed with Theo's arm draped protectively over her waist, Journey allowed herself to imagine a future where this could be normal, where the man breathing softly beside her wasn't a temporary visitor to her life, but a permanent fixture. It was a dangerous thought, but in the darkness, she let herself believe it might be possible. What she didn't know was that across town, Alexander Reed was putting his plan into motion. The photos his private investigator had taken, of Theo at the clinic at Cornerstone Books, entering Journey's apartment building, were spread across his desk. Along with them was a detailed report on William Harris's financial situation and the precarious state of the Jackson Ward Clinic. "Perfect," Alexander murmured, picking up his phone. It was time to arrange a meeting with Dr. Harris, one that would test just how deep his daughter's connection with Theo Maddox really went. The next morning, Journey woke to find Theo already dressed and making coffee in her tiny kitchen. The domesticity of the scene made her heart ache with wanting. "Morning," he said, smiling as he handed her a mug. "I hope you don't mind, but I have an early meeting I couldn't reschedule. I didn't want to wake you." "It's fine," she said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Back to the real world, right?" A shadow passed over his face. "This is real, Journey. Last night was real." "I know," she said, though part of her still expected to wake up from this dream at any moment. "I just meant your work, responsibilities." He nodded, checking his watch. "I should go. But dinner tonight? I want to show you something." "Okay," she agreed, walking him to the door. "What should I wear?" "Anything comfortable. Where we're going, dress codes don't apply." With a quick kiss, he was gone, leaving Journey to wonder what he had planned. She spent the morning at the bookstore, helping with the ongoing cleanup and discussing Mr. Finch's retirement plans. The old man seemed more serious about selling than she'd realized, and Theo's suggestion that she might take over kept resurfacing in her mind. "You'd be good at it," Eliza said when Journey confided the idea to her. "You practically run this place already." "But the money," Journey objected. "Even with a loan, it's a huge risk." "Life is a risk," her friend replied sagely. "The question is whether it's worth taking." By the time Journey left to check on her father, she was seriously considering Theo's offer, not because it came from him, but because it aligned with a dream she'd been too practical to pursue. She found her father at the clinic, looking more tired than he should have. "Dad, you're supposed to be taking it easy," she scolded, noting the stack of patient files on his desk. "Can't afford to," William replied. "The temporary help is leaving next week." Journey frowned. "What? Why didn't you tell me?" "Just found out myself." He handed her a letter. Apparently, the program was only designed for short-term assistance. The letter was on Maddox Foundation letterhead, explaining that while they were pleased to have provided temporary staffing, the arrangement would end the following Friday. There was no mention of renewal or extension. "I'll talk to Theo," Journey said, confusion and hurt competing in her chest. Why hadn't he warned her about this? "No need," her father said firmly. "We managed before, we'll manage again." "But your health is fine," he insisted. "Besides, I had an interesting meeting this morning, a potential solution to our problems." Something in his tone made Journey uneasy. "What kind of meeting?" "A businessman named Alexander Reed came by. He's interested in funding community health initiatives, including our clinic." The name struck a chord, though Journey couldn't immediately place it. "That's good?" she said uncertainly. "Could be very good. He's talking about a substantial endowment, enough to secure the clinic's future for years." William studied his daughter's face. "He mentioned knowing your Theo." "He's not my Theo," Journey corrected automatically. Then the connection clicked. "Wait, Alexander Reed, isn't he Maddox's main competitor?" her father confirmed. "Which might explain why he's interested in us." Reed mentioned that Theo had been helping us, seemed quite curious about your relationship. Alarm bells rang in Journey's head. Dad, did you tell him anything? Nothing he couldn't find out himself, William said defensively. It's not exactly a secret that you two are seeing each other. Journey felt sick. Whatever Alexander Reed's interest in the clinic, she doubted it was philanthropic. Dad, please don't agree to anything from Reed. Not until I've had a chance to talk to Theo about it. William's expression hardened. So now we need your boyfriend's permission to accept help? Isn't that exactly what you were worried about? Becoming dependent on his charity? This is different, she insisted. Reed isn't offering help. He's using you to get to Theo. Using us. You don't know that. I know enough. She took her father's hand. Please, just wait. Give me a day or two to figure this out. Reluctantly he agreed, though his parting words haunted her. The clinic can't wait forever, Journey. At some point we have to accept help wherever we can find it. That evening, as Journey dressed for her date with Theo, her mind was a tangle of worries. The foundation letter, Alexander Reed's sudden interest, her father's stubborn pride, it all pointed to complications she wasn't sure how to navigate. When Theo arrived, handsome in casual clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent, she tried to push her concerns aside. Whatever was happening, she trusted him enough to believe there was an explanation. Ready for an adventure? He asked, eyes bright with excitement. Always, she replied, deciding her questions could wait until later. Tonight, she wanted to enjoy whatever he had planned. They drove out of the city, heading west into countryside that grew increasingly rural. Eventually, Theo turned onto a private road that wound through dense woods before opening onto a clearing. In the center stood a cabin, not a rustic shack, but a beautifully designed structure of wood and glass that seemed to grow naturally from its surroundings. What is this place? Journey asked as they parked. Mine, Theo said simply, leading her to the door. Or it will be once construction is finished. Inside the cabin was a work in progress. Some areas fully furnished, others still raw. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out on forest, and in the distance, the glint of water. There's a lake about a quarter-mile that way, Theo explained, watching her take it all in. My grandfather used to bring me fishing there when I was a kid. This land has been in my family for generations. It's beautiful, Journey said honestly. But why show me now? Theo guided her to a window seat sitting beside her. Because this is my real world, Journey. Not the penthouse or the boardroom. This, he gestured to the simple, beautiful space around them. This is where I feel like myself. The vulnerability in his admission touched her deeply. He was sharing something private, personal, a piece of himself few people got to see. I come here when things get overwhelming, he continued, when I need to remember what matters. And what matters? She asked softly. His hand found hers. Peace, authenticity, connection. His eyes held hers. You. The word hung in the air between them, a declaration neither had been brave enough to make until now. Theo, she began, not sure what to say. You don't have to say anything, he assured her. I just wanted you to see this place, to understand that there's more to me than the public persona. That the man you've been dating isn't just playing at normalcy, he's finding his way back to it. In that moment, looking at him framed by the fading light through the windows, Journey made a decision. She leaned forward and kissed him, putting all her conflicted feelings into the connection of their lips. What began as tenderness quickly blazed into something more urgent. Months of restraint, of careful boundaries, dissolved in the heat between them. Theo's hands tangled in her hair, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened. Are you sure? He whispered against her mouth when they paused for breath. In answer, she stood, taking his hand and leading him toward the bedroom she'd glimpsed earlier. Tonight, she wouldn't overthink, wouldn't worry about tomorrow. Tonight, she would simply feel. Hours later, wrapped in a blanket on the cabin's porch swing, Journey watched the stars appear above the trees. Theo's arm was around her, his heartbeat steady against her back. What are you thinking? He asked, echoing her question from the night before. That I'm happy, she admitted, and that scares me. Why? She turned to face him. Because happiness never lasts, Theo, at least not in my experience. His expression grew serious. Maybe you just haven't given it enough time. The moment felt right for honesty, for addressing the concerns she'd been holding back. There's something I need to ask you about. She told him about the foundation letter, about her father's meeting with Alexander Reed. As she spoke, Theo's face darkened. Reed approached your father, he asked, his voice tight. What exactly did he offer? An endowment for the clinic, Dad said it was substantial. She studied Theo's reaction. You're not surprised about the foundation letter, though? Theo sighed. No, I knew the program was temporary. I should have told you, but I was working on a more permanent solution, one that wouldn't feel like charity. What kind of solution? A partnership between Jackson Ward Clinic and Richmond Memorial. Your father's expertise in community care combined with Memorial's resources. It would secure the clinic's future while maintaining its independence. Journey was stunned. You've been arranging this? Why didn't you say anything? Because I wanted it to be real, not something pushed through because of my influence. The board at Memorial is reviewing the proposal next week. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. Reed must have found out somehow. He's always looking for ways to undermine me, personally and professionally. This isn't about business, though, Journey objected. This is my father's life's work. To Reed, everything is business, including the people I care about. Theo's gaze was intense. Journey, you need to understand. Alexander Reed is dangerous. He doesn't make offers without expecting something in return. What would he expect from my father? The clinic isn't exactly a valuable asset. It's not about the clinic, Theo said quietly. It's about you, about us. Reed knows how I feel about you, and he'll use that if he can. The implications sank in slowly. How he would use it? To distract me, to gain leverage, to find weaknesses he can exploit. Theo's expression was grim. In his world, relationships are just another form of currency. Journey pulled away slightly, wrapping the blanket tighter around herself. And in your world? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. Was she just currency to Theo as well? A different kind, perhaps, but still something to be acquired and displayed. In my world, he said finally, relationships are rare. Trust is rarer. What we have, he gestured between them. This isn't about business or advantage. It's about the fact that when I'm with you, I remember who I am beyond the money and the company. You make me better, Journey. She wanted to believe him. After tonight, after seeing this private retreat and sharing such intimacy, she almost did. But the foundation letter nagged at her, a reminder that Theo's help came with time frames and conditions, whether spoken or not. What do we do about Reed, she asked, setting aside her deeper doubts for the moment. I'll handle Reed, Theo said, with a confidence that reminded her of the powerful businessman he was. But I need you to convince your father not to accept anything from him. Not money, not equipment, nothing. He's stubborn, Journey warned, and proud. So am I, Theo replied with a hint of a smile. Tell him the Memorial partnership is real. Tell him to wait one more week. She nodded, hoping her father would listen. I should get home. Dad will worry if I'm out too late. Though reluctant to end their evening, Theo understood. The drive back to Richmond was quiet, both lost in thoughts about what had changed between them and what challenges lay ahead. At her apartment, he walked her to the door. Journey, about tonight. I don't regret it, she said quickly. If that's what you're worried about. Relief softened his features. Good, neither do I. He kissed her gently. Get some rest. I'll call you tomorrow. Watching him walk away, Journey felt a curious mixture of certainty and doubt. The connection between them was real. Tonight had proved that beyond question. But whether it was enough to withstand the complications of their different worlds remained to be seen. Inside, she found a message from her father. Reed called again, offering a tour of his foundation facilities tomorrow. I said yes. Don't be angry, just gathering information. Journey's heart sank. Despite her warnings, her father was walking straight into whatever trap Alexander Reed was setting. She picked up her phone to call Theo, then hesitated. This was her family, her responsibility. She needed to handle it herself. Instead, she texted her father, I'm coming with you tomorrow. His reply came quickly. Good. Could use your opinion. Pick you up at 10. Setting down her phone, Journey prepared for bed, her mind racing with worries. What did Reed want? How far would he go? And most troubling of all was her relationship with Theo putting her father at risk. As she drifted off to sleep, memories of the cabin, of Theo's touch and whispered words, battled with her fears about tomorrow's meeting. Whatever Reed's game was, she would face it head-on. For her father's sake, and for her own peace of mind, she needed to know exactly what they were dealing with. Across town, in his sleek office tower, Alexander Reed reviewed the latest information from his sources. The timing couldn't be better. Theo Maddox was distracted, vulnerable in a way Reed had never seen before, and tomorrow he would meet the woman responsible for that vulnerability. Let's see how much she's really worth to you, Theo, he murmured. closing the file labeled Harris J. On his desk lay the documents for a very different kind of proposal than the one he'd discussed with Dr. Harris, one designed to test just how far Journey would go to protect her father's legacy. What Reed didn't anticipate was that the woman he saw as merely a pawn in his game with Theo was about to prove herself a formidable opponent in her own right. Because while Journey Harris might doubt her place in Theo's world, she had never doubted her own strength, and she would need every ounce of it for what lay ahead. The next morning dawned clear and bright, at odds with Journey's troubled mood. She dressed carefully for the meeting with Reed, choosing clothes that projected confidence, a simple black dress with a tailored jacket, her mother's necklace her only accessory. Her father picked her up precisely at 10, looking more energetic than he had in weeks. "You look nice," he commented as she got in the car. "Thanks," she replied, studying him. "You seem excited about this meeting." William shrugged. "It's a potential solution, Journey. Something that doesn't depend on your boyfriend's goodwill." She bit back a defensive response. "Dad, Theo mentioned a partnership with Richmond Memorial, a real, legitimate collaboration that would secure the clinic's future. He mentioned it to you, not to me," her father pointed out, "and forgive me if I'm skeptical about promises from a man who withdrew help without warning." "The foundation program was always temporary," she began, then stopped herself. Arguing would only make him more stubborn. "Just promise me you won't agree to anything today. Let's just listen to what Reed has to say." Her father nodded, though Journey wasn't sure he meant it. The Reed Foundation occupied the top floors of a gleaming office tower downtown. Unlike Theo's warm, inviting workspace that Journey had visited once, Reed's domain was all chrome and glass. Impressive but cold. They were escorted to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Alexander Reed was waiting, rising to greet them with practiced charm. In his 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and sharp features, he exuded a calculated magnetism. "Dr. Harris, so good to see you again," he said, shaking William's hand before turning to Journey. "And you must be the daughter I've heard so much about." Alexander Reed. His handshake was firm, his smile not quite reaching his eyes as they assessed her. Journey met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. "Thank you for meeting with us, Mr. Reed," she said politely. "Please call me Alexander. Any friend of Theo's is a friend of mine." The insincerity in his tone was barely disguised. As they took their seats, Journey noticed photographs on the wall, Reed with politicians, celebrities, world leaders. A display of connections and influence. "I've been reviewing your clinic situation, Dr. Harris," Reed began, sliding a folder across the table. "Impressive work you've done with limited resources, but the building is outdated, equipment needs upgrading, and your patient load continues to grow." William nodded. "Those are our challenges, yes. Challenges my foundation is well positioned to address," Reed continued smoothly. "We're prepared to offer a comprehensive support package, new equipment, building renovations, even additional staff." "That's very generous," William said cautiously. "What would you expect in return?" Reed smiled. "Simply an acknowledgement of our support. Nothing that would compromise your independence or mission." It sounded too good to be true, and in Journey's experience, that meant it probably was. "Why the sudden interest in community healthcare, Mr. Reed?" she asked. "Alexander," he corrected, "and it's hardly sudden. My foundation has supported numerous healthcare initiatives over the years." He regarded her with cool amusement. "Though I admit, your clinic caught my attention recently. Small operations with big impact, that's where real change happens. And the fact that Theo Maddox has been helping us is just a coincidence?" Journey pressed. Reed's smile tightened fractionally. "Theo's involvement certainly highlighted your work, but my interest is genuine, I assure you." The meeting continued with Reed outlining his proposal, financial support that far exceeded what the clinic had ever received, with surprisingly few apparent strings attached. William grew increasingly enthusiastic as Reed described new equipment, expanded facilities, even scholarships for neighborhood students interested in healthcare careers. Journey remained silent, watching the performance unfold, because that's what it was. A performance designed to appeal to her father's dreams for the clinic, while concealing Reed's true motives. When Reed excused himself to take a call, leaving them alone for a few minutes, William turned to Journey with excitement. "This could be exactly what we need. Why are you looking so skeptical?" "Because it's not about the clinic, Dad," she said quietly. "It's about me, about Theo." Her father frowned. "Not everything revolves around your relationship, Journey." "In this case, it does." She leaned forward urgently, Reed and Theo are rivals, fierce ones. He's using us to get to Theo, and I'm afraid of what that might mean. Before William could respond, Reed returned, now accompanied by a younger man carrying additional documents. "I've taken the liberty of drafting a preliminary agreement," Reed announced. "Nothing binding yet, just an outline of what we've discussed." William reached for the papers, but Journey spoke first. "What's the real offer, Mr. Reed?" The room went still. Reed studied her with new interest. "I'm not sure I understand." "I think you do," she said evenly. "This isn't about my father's clinic. It's about Theo Maddox, and for some reason, you think I'm useful in whatever game you're playing with him. So let's stop pretending. What do you really want?" A slow smile spread across Reed's face, genuine this time and all the more unsettling for it. "Direct. I appreciate that." He dismissed his assistant with a nod. "You're right, Ms. Harris. This isn't just about the clinic." "Journey," her father began, confused, but Reed continued. "Theo Maddox and I have been competitors for years. Usually I know exactly what he's thinking, what he's planning, but lately," Reed's gaze fixed on Journey. "Lately, he's been distracted, making decisions that don't align with his usual patterns, and it all seems to coincide with your appearance in his life. So this is what?" "Intelligence gathering," Journey asked, disgust evident in her tone. "Information is valuable," Reed acknowledged, "but so is leverage. Theo cares about you, perhaps more than is wise in our line of work. That makes you significant." William looked between them, finally understanding dawning. "You're using my clinic to get to my daughter? To get to Maddox?" "I prefer to think of it as multiple parties benefiting from an arrangement," Reed replied smoothly. "Your clinic gets the support it desperately needs, and in exchange, Ms. Harris provides me with insights into Theo's current thinking. Nothing confidential, nothing damaging, just a general sense of his focus, his priorities." "You're asking me to spy on him," Journey said flatly. Reed shrugged. "I'm asking you to have conversations, to listen, to occasionally share observations that might help me understand my competitor better. And if I refuse, then unfortunately, my foundation would need to reconsider its commitment to Jackson Ward Clinic." Reed's expression hardened, "which would be a shame given the community's needs." William stood abruptly. "We're done here. Keep your money and your arrangement." "Dad," Journey began, surprised by his sudden decision. "No, Journey. I won't have my work used as leverage against you, or against anyone." He gathered his coat. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Reed, but we'll find another way." Pride and love for her father swelled in Journey's chest as she stood to join him, but Reed's next words stopped them both. "Before you go, there's something else you should know." He opened a drawer, removing a file. "The memorial partnership Theo mentioned? It's not happening." Journey's heart sank. "What are you talking about?" "The board voted yesterday, unanimously rejected the proposal." Reed's satisfaction was evident. "Theo hasn't told you yet, has he?" "Interesting." "You're lying," Journey said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. Reed pushed the file toward her. "See for yourself, board minutes, voting record. It seems Theo's influence isn't quite what it used to be." With trembling hands, Journey opened the file. The documents looked authentic. Official letterhead signatures, a clear record of the vote against the partnership. "This doesn't change anything," William said firmly. "We're still leaving." "Of course," Reed agreed, standing. "But my offer remains open, for now." He handed Journey his card. "When you realize Theo can't deliver what he promised, call me. The clinic's future is still salvageable." Outside in the car, William gripped the steering wheel tightly. "I'm sorry, Journey. I should have listened to you about Reed." "It's okay, Dad," she said distractedly, her mind racing. Was Reed telling the truth about the memorial vote? Had Theo known and kept it from her? After everything they'd shared at the cabin, the thought of such a significant omission was devastating. "What will you do?" her father asked gently. "I need to talk to Theo," she said. "Find out if what Reed said is true." William nodded. "And if it is?" Journey stared out the window, watching Richmond pass by in a blur. "Then I need to decide what that means for us. For all of us." As her father drove her home, Journey felt the foundation of her newfound happiness beginning to crack. She'd allowed herself to believe in Theo, to trust that what they shared was real. But if he'd lied about something as important as the clinic partnership, about her father's future, what else might he be hiding? At her apartment, she found a bouquet of wildflowers waiting by her door with a simple note, "Thinking of you. Last night was perfect." The sight of his handwriting made her chest ache. She brought the flowers inside, setting them on her kitchen counter while trying to decide what to do. Confront him immediately. Wait until she'd calmed down. Part of her wanted to believe there was an explanation, that Reed was manipulating the situation, but the documents had looked legitimate. She was still deliberating when her phone rang. Theo's name flashed on the screen. "Hello?" she answered, working to keep her voice neutral. "Hey," he said warmly. "I've been thinking about you all day. Any chance you're free for dinner tonight?" "Actually," she said slowly, "I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come over?" There was a brief pause. "Of course. Is everything okay?" "I don't know," she admitted. "That's what we need to discuss." "I'll be there in 30 minutes, he promised, concern evident in his voice. After hanging up, Journey paced her small living room, rehearsing what to say. How did you ask someone if they'd been lying to you? If the intimacy you'd shared was built on deception? When the knock came, she took a deep breath before opening the door. Theo stood there, handsome as ever, but with worry clouding his features. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, stepping inside. Journey gestured for him to sit. "Dad and I met with Alexander Reed today." Theo's expression darkened. "I thought we agreed you'd wait." "We didn't agree on anything," she corrected. "I said I'd talk to Dad, and I did, but he wanted to hear what Reed had to offer." Theo ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "What did Reed say?" "A lot of things. Most importantly, he showed us documentation that the memorial partnership was rejected yesterday, that the board voted unanimously against it." She watched his face carefully. "Is that true?" The flash of surprise in his eyes told her what she needed to know before he even spoke. "Yes, but you knew," she said quietly. "You knew and you didn't tell me. After everything we shared last night, you let me believe a solution was coming when you already knew it had failed." "Journey, it's not that simple," Theo insisted. "The vote was yesterday afternoon. I found out while we were at the cabin, but I didn't want to ruin our evening with bad news. So you just, what? Decided to keep me in the dark? Let me find out from Reed instead." "I was going to tell you today," he said. "I spent the morning working on an alternative plan, something better than the memorial partnership." She wanted to believe him, but doubt had taken root. "What alternative?" "A private healthcare initiative, funded by my personal foundation, not the corporate one with all its restrictions and timeframes." He leaned forward earnestly. "It would support not just your father's clinic, but similar operations across the city, completely autonomous with your father on the governing board." It sounded perfect, too perfect. "And you came up with this entire plan just this morning?" "The framework was already there," he admitted. "I've been developing it for weeks as a backup in case Memorial fell through." "Weeks?" she repeated. "You've been planning this for weeks, but never mentioned it to me or to my father, because I wanted it to be solid before I presented it. I didn't want to get your hopes up." The explanation was reasonable, yet something still felt off. "What does Reed get out of exposing this to us? Why show us the board minutes?" Theo's expression hardened. "To drive a wedge between us. To make you doubt me. It's what he does. Finds weaknesses and exploits them." "And I'm your weakness?" The question emerged softer than she intended. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "You are. Because I care about you, Journey. More than I've cared about anyone in a very long time." The sincerity in his voice made her want to end the conversation, to accept his explanation and move forward. But Reed's insinuations had raised questions she couldn't ignore. "Reed offered Dad everything the clinic needs," she said. "Equipment, renovations, staffing. In exchange, he wanted information about you, about your plans, your priorities." Theo's face went still. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing." Dad turned him down flat, walked out the moment Reed made his real intentions clear. Pride colored her voice. "He wouldn't let the clinic be used as leverage against me. Against us." Relief softened Theo's features. "Your father's a good man." "Yes, he is." Journey paused, gathering courage for her next question. "But it made me wonder, what is Reed so interested in? What's happening with you or your company that makes information so valuable right now?" It was a direct challenge, one Theo clearly hadn't expected. He hesitated, and in that hesitation, Journey felt her fears confirmed. "There are some sensitive developments at Maddox Innovations," he said carefully. "Projects that could significantly impact our market position." "And that's all you're going to tell me?" she pressed. "It's complicated, Journey. There are confidentiality concerns, legal implications." "I'm not asking for corporate secrets," she interrupted. "I'm asking for honesty, because right now it feels like you're keeping parts of your life separate from me, from us." Theo stood, moving to the window as if needing space to think. When he turned back, his expression was conflicted. "You're right," he said finally. I haven't been completely open. Not because I don't trust you, but because I've been trying to keep you separate from that part of my world. The cutthroat business, the rivalries, the constant maneuvering. It's ugly, Journey. It's not who I want to be when I'm with you. The admission wasn't what she'd expected, but it is part of who you are. Yes, he acknowledged. A part I've been trying to compartmentalize. That doesn't work, she said softly. Not in real relationships. You can't just show me the parts of yourself you think I'll like and hide the rest. Theo moved back to her, taking her hands. You're right, and I'm sorry. His eyes held hers. The truth is, Maddox Innovations is developing technology that could revolutionize rural healthcare delivery, portable diagnostic equipment, telemedicine infrastructure that works even in areas with poor connectivity. It's what I was planning to implement at your father's clinic as a pilot program. And Reed wants to steal it, Journey guessed, or delay it or discredit it. The first company to market with this technology stands to secure contracts worth billions. He squeezed her hands. But more importantly, it could change lives, make quality healthcare accessible in places it's never been before. The passion in his voice was compelling, making Journey see a different side of him, not just the businessman, but the innovator who genuinely wanted to make a difference. Why didn't you tell me this before, she asked. Because talking about it makes it real, he said simply, makes it part of us. And I've been afraid that once business enters our relationship, everything will change, that you'll start seeing me differently. I already see you differently, she pointed out. I see all of you, Theo, the man who builds model ships and the CEO who develops revolutionary technology, the man who cooks terrible eggs, and the billionaire who can solve problems with a phone call. She took a deep breath. The question is whether you're willing to let me see all of you, not just the parts you think I want. Theo studied her face, something like wonder in his expression. I didn't think that was possible, he admitted. Everyone else in my life, they only want specific versions of me. The successful businessman, the generous donor, the eligible bachelor. I just want you, Journey said. The real you, all of it. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I'm sorry, he whispered against her hair, for not telling you about Memorial, for trying to keep parts of my life separate from you. It won't happen again. She let herself melt into his embrace, wanting to believe him, but a small voice of caution remained. What about the clinic? What happens now? Theo drew back, his expression determined. We move forward with the private initiative. It's actually better than the Memorial partnership would have been. More funding, more autonomy. I'll present it to your father tomorrow if you think he'll listen. He'll listen, Journey assured him, especially after Reed's true intentions became clear. They spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, about Theo's work, his plans for the healthcare initiative, the pressure he faced from competitors like Reed. For the first time, Journey felt like she was seeing the complete picture of the man she was falling for, complexities and contradictions included. Later, lying beside him in her bed, a thought occurred to her. Reed thinks I'm your weakness, she said softly. But what if I'm actually your strength? Theo propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with curiosity. What do you mean? You've been trying to keep your worlds separate. Theo the man and Theo the businessman. But maybe they're stronger together, maybe... She hesitated, suddenly self-conscious. Maybe we're stronger together. His expression softened into a smile. I think you might be right. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Reed has always seen relationships as liabilities, points of vulnerability. But with you, I feel more focused, more clear about what matters. That's not weakness, that's power. The conviction in his voice settled something in Journey's heart. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Reed's machinations, the clinic's future, the complications of their different worlds, they would face them together, with honesty between them. What she didn't know was that Reed was already implementing the next phase of his plan. While Journey and Theo had been resolving their misunderstanding, Reed's team had been analyzing the documentation from William Harris's clinic, patient records, financial information, treatment protocols, looking for irregularities, for anything that could be used as leverage if his first approach failed, and they had found something. A discrepancy in the clinic's medication dispensing records from 3 years ago, during a period when William had been struggling with his own health. Nothing criminal, but enough to raise questions, to trigger audits, to potentially jeopardize the clinic's license if presented in the right light. Reed hadn't wanted to use such heavy-handed tactics, but Theo Maddox's healthcare technology was too valuable, its potential market impact too significant. If Journey Harris wouldn't provide information willingly, There were other ways to create the distraction Reed needed. As dawn broke over Richmond, Journey woke to find Theo already dressed, sitting at her small kitchen table with his laptop open. "Morning," he said, smiling as she emerged from the bedroom. "I made coffee." "Thanks." She accepted the mug he offered, noting the intensity of his focus. "Working already?" "Finalizing the healthcare initiative proposal for your father," he explained. "I want it to be perfect." Journey leaned down to kiss him, a surge of affection overwhelming her doubts from the previous day. This was the real Theo, dedicated, brilliant, determined to help. "He'll love it," she assured him, "and so will the patients." Theo caught her hand. "Thank you for giving me another chance, for believing in me even when I made it difficult. Just don't make it difficult again," she warned with a smile. "I'm not a fan of surprises, especially ones that come from Alexander Reed." "Speaking of Reed," Theo said, his expression growing serious, "I want you and your father to be careful. He doesn't accept rejection well, especially in public. What do you think he'll do?" "I'm not sure," Theo admitted. "But Reed plays the long game. He won't give up after one failed attempt." Journey nodded, remembering the calculated look in Reed's eyes. "We'll be careful. Dad's pretty street smart for a doctor. He can spot trouble coming." "Good." Theo checked his watch. "I have a meeting I can't reschedule, but I'll come by the clinic this afternoon to present the proposal to your father. Around 3? Perfect, I'll make sure he's there." After Theo left, Journey prepared for her shift at the bookstore, her mind lighter than it had been in days. The honesty between them had cleared the air, making her feel more secure in their relationship than ever before. What she didn't anticipate was the call that came just after noon, her father, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Journey, I need you to come to the clinic. Now." "Dad, what's wrong?" "Health department inspectors are here," he said quietly, "with questions about our medication protocols from 3 years ago. Someone filed a complaint, complete with documentation." Journey's blood ran cold. "Reed." "My thoughts exactly," William agreed. "This feels like retaliation." "I'm on my way," she promised, already grabbing her purse. At the clinic, Journey found her father in his office with 2 stern-faced inspectors. The waiting room was full of anxious patients, whispering among themselves as official-looking people moved through the building, examining records and taking photographs. "Ms. Harris," one of the inspectors acknowledged as she entered. "We're just asking your father about some irregularities in the clinic's medication, dispensing records from 2022. "What irregularities?" Journey asked, her voice steadier than she felt. The woman slid a document across the desk, a spreadsheet highlighting discrepancies between medications received and those recorded as dispensed. The period in question coincided exactly with her father's heart problems, when he'd been working reduced hours and temporary staff had managed the clinic. "There are perfectly reasonable explanations for these discrepancies," William insisted. "We had staffing issues during that period. Record-keeping errors, not misconduct. We'll need to see documentation supporting that," the inspector replied. "In the meantime, we're issuing a temporary suspension of the clinic's license to dispense medications." "What?" Journey exclaimed. "You can't do that. We have patients who depend on those medications." "They can fill prescriptions at pharmacies," the woman said unsympathetically. "This is standard procedure during an investigation." William's face was ashen, but his voice remained professional. "How long will this investigation take?" "Difficult to say. Weeks, possibly months." The implications were clear. Without the ability to provide medications, the clinic's most vulnerable patients would suffer. Many couldn't afford pharmacy prices or lacked transportation to get there. The clinic's reputation would be damaged, perhaps irreparably. As the inspectors continued their work, Journey pulled her father into the hallway. "This is Reed," she said in a low voice. "He's punishing us for turning him down." William nodded grimly. "I suspected as much when they mentioned the exact period I was ill. Those records weren't public. Someone with resources and connections accessed them specifically." "We need to call Theo," Journey said, reaching for her phone. Her father caught her wrist. "No. Dad, he can help. He has lawyers, influence." "And that's exactly what Reed wants," William interrupted. "To drag Theo into this, to create a public connection between his company and our clinic, just as he's launching this healthcare technology you told me about." Journey hesitated, seeing the logic. "But we can't fight this alone." "We're not alone," her father said firmly. "We have the truth on our side, and I have decades of goodwill in this community." Reed miscalculated if he thought a little bureaucratic harassment would break us. She admired her father's resolve, but the reality was stark. Without the ability to dispense medications, the clinic would lose patients. Without patients, it would lose income. Without income, it wouldn't survive long enough for any investigation to clear its name. At least, let me warn Theo, she pleaded. He's coming at 3 to present his healthcare initiative. He should know what's happening. William considered, then nodded. Tell him, but make it clear that I don't want his intervention, not yet. Let's see how this plays out first. Journey stepped outside to make the call, her heart racing as she explained the situation to Theo. His reaction was exactly what she'd expected. Immediate anger followed by a determination to fix the problem. This is a direct attack, he said, his voice hard. Reed's using your father to get to me. Dad thinks so too, she agreed. But he doesn't want you involved yet. He thinks that's what Reed wants, to create a public connection between you and the clinic. Your father's probably right, Theo admitted reluctantly. Reed's trying to force my hand, to make me choose between protecting my business interests and protecting you. The blunt assessment sent a chill through Journey. What does that mean for us? There was a pause before Theo answered. It means we need to be smarter than Reed, more strategic. His voice softened. But it doesn't change anything between us, Johnny. If anything, it makes me more certain that what we have is worth fighting for. The conviction in his tone steadied her. So what do we do? For now, we follow your father's lead. I'll still come at 3, but instead of the public initiative I'd planned, we'll develop a more private approach. Something that helps the clinic without creating headlines Reed can exploit. Thank you, Journey said, relief washing over her. For understanding, for not making this about business. It was never about business, Theo replied softly. Not with you. After hanging up, Journey returned to the clinic, where the inspection was continuing. Her father was with patients, maintaining a calm exterior despite the chaos around him. His strength in the face of this attack only increased her determination to protect him, to protect the clinic he'd built with such care. What she didn't realize was that while she'd been focused on the clinic crisis, Alexander Reed had implemented the second part of his strategy. A business reporter for the Richmond Daily had received an anonymous tip about Theo Maddox's personal involvement with a local clinic currently under investigation for medication irregularities, the same clinic connected to his new girlfriend, Journey Harris. By the time Theo arrived at 3, the story was already online, complete with photos of him entering the clinic and speculation about whether his relationship with Journey had influenced his business decisions. The headline read, Tech Billionaire's Romance Clouds Business Judgment. Maddox linked to clinic under investigation. The trap had been sprung, more effectively than even Reed had anticipated. Now Theo would have to choose, defend his business reputation by distancing himself from the clinic and by extension from Journey, or stand by them and risk having his healthcare technology project tainted by association. What Reed hadn't factored in was the strength of the connection between Journey and Theo, a bond forged not just through attraction, but through mutual respect and hard-won honesty. As they sat in William's office that afternoon, reviewing the damaging article together, there was no hesitation in Theo's response. Reed thinks he's forcing me to choose between my company and you, he said, looking directly at Journey. But there is no choice to make. We face this together. William, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. That's a noble sentiment, Theo, but practically speaking, your involvement now will only make things worse for all of us. With respect, Dr. Harris, I disagree, Theo replied. Reed's already created the association in the public mind. Backing away now won't help. It will just make it look like there's something to hide. So, what do you suggest? William asked. Theo's expression was determined. We fight back, publicly and legally. We challenge the inspection, highlight its suspicious timing, and we do it while moving forward with our plans for the clinic. We show Reed and everyone else that intimidation tactics won't work. Journey watched the exchange, her heart swelling with pride for both men, her father with his principled dedication, Theo with his unwavering support. Whatever happened next, they would face it as a united front. There's something else you should know, Theo added, his voice softer. This isn't just about business for Reed anymore, it's personal. He's never been able to beat me fairly, and it's become an obsession for him. Why? Journey asked. Theo hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. Because 12 years ago, when my parents died and I took over the company, Reed tried to take advantage. He made a hostile takeover attempt, thinking I was too young, too grief-stricken to fight back. His expression hardened at the memory. He was wrong. I not only fought back, I expanded into markets he considered his territory. He's never forgiven that. So this is about revenge, William said, understanding dawning. Partly, Theo agreed. But it's also about the healthcare technology. If he can delay our launch even by a few months, his company might catch up. The stakes are enormous, both financially and in terms of human impact. Journey thought of all the people who could benefit from Theo's innovation, including her father's patients. Reed wasn't just attacking them, he was potentially harming countless others who needed that technology. Then we don't let him win, she said firmly. Any of us. As the three of them began planning their response, Journey felt a shift in her relationship with Theo, a deepening, a strengthening. The barriers between his world and hers were dissolving, not because she was entering his realm of wealth and power, but because they were creating something new together, something built on mutual respect and shared purpose. What Reed had intended as a wedge had instead become a bridge, connecting them more firmly than before. And as they worked side by side into the evening, Journey realized that maybe, just maybe, the table mix-up that had brought them together hadn't been a mistake after all, but the first step on a path they were meant to walk together. Across town, Alexander Reed received the news of Theo's decision to stand with the Harris family with cold fury. His carefully laid trap had backfired, pushing Theo and Journey closer rather than driving them apart. But Reed wasn't finished. He had one final card to play, one that would test not just their relationship but Theo's deepest values. Tomorrow the real battle would begin, and before it ended, Journey would discover just how far Theo Maddox would go for the woman he loved and how much she was willing to risk for him in return. The media storm hit with full force the next morning. Journey woke to find reporters camped outside her apartment building, shouting questions as she tried to leave for work. The story had evolved overnight from business speculation to personal scandal, with tabloid-style headlines questioning whether she was a gold digger who had trapped Theo Maddox to secure funding for her father's clinic. Ms. Harris, is it true you deliberately targeted Theo Maddox at Maison Bleue? Did you know about the medication irregularities at your father's clinic? Are you and Theo Maddox engaged? The questions flew at her like arrows as she pushed through the crowd, head down, refusing to engage. Her phone buzzed constantly with calls from numbers she didn't recognize, reporters hungry for her side of the story. At Cornerstone Books, Mr. Finch greeted her with worried eyes. "There are people outside asking about you," he said. "Something about that young man who helped with the flood." "It's complicated," Journey replied, setting down her purse with shaking hands. "I'm so sorry they're bothering the store." "Nonsense," the old man said firmly. "You've nothing to be sorry for. I told them to take their gossip elsewhere, or I'd call the police." His support meant more than he could know. "Thank you, Mr. Finch." The morning passed in a blur of nervous customers and whispered conversations that stopped when Journey approached. By noon, even Eliza's unfailing cheerfulness had dimmed. "Have you seen this?" she asked hesitantly, showing Journey her phone. The screen displayed a slick business news website with the headline, "Maddox Innovations Stock Drops 7% Amid Scandal." Below was a photo of Theo entering the clinic, looking grim, with Journey beside him. The article speculated about whether Theo's personal entanglements were affecting his business judgment and quoted anonymous sources suggesting the company's board was concerned about his recent behavior. Journey felt sick. This was exactly what William had feared, Theo's association with them causing real damage to his company. She was about to call him when her phone lit up with his name. "Are you okay?" he asked immediately when she answered. "I'm fine," she lied. "Just some reporters outside my apartment and the store. Nothing I can't handle." "I'm sending security to both locations," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "This has gone beyond normal media interest. Reed is feeding them information, keeping the story alive." Journey wanted to protest but knew he was right. "What about you? I saw the stock price." "It's nothing," he dismissed. "Short-term market reaction to negative press. It will stabilize." "Theo, this is exactly what my father was worried about. Your company is suffering because of us." "Because of Reed," he corrected. "Not because of you. Never because of you." His certainty should have been reassuring, but Journey couldn't shake the feeling that their relationship was becoming a liability for him, professionally and personally. "Maybe we should take a step back," she suggested, the words painful to speak. "Just until this dies down." There was a long pause. "Is that what you want?" "No," she admitted, "but I don't want to be the reason your company loses value or your board loses faith in you." Journey, listen to me. His voice was intense. The company will recover. Stock prices fluctuate. What doesn't change is how I feel about you. Taking a step back won't solve anything. It will just give Reed what he wants. She knew he was right, but the doubt persisted. What about the clinic? The investigation? My legal team is already on it. The timing and specificity of the complaint make it clearly targeted. We'll have the suspension lifted within days. His confidence was encouraging, but Journey still felt uneasy. I should go. Customers are waiting. I'll come by when you finish work, Theo promised. We'll figure this out together. After hanging up, Journey tried to focus on her job, but the weight of the situation made it difficult. This wasn't just about her anymore, or even about her father's clinic. Theo's reputation, his company, his life's work, all were now entangled with hers. When her shift ended, she found a sleek black SUV waiting outside. The driver, a professional-looking woman in a suit, approached her. Ms. Harris, I'm Diane from Maddox Security. Mr. Maddox asked me to escort you safely home. Journey hesitated, uncomfortable with the formality, but aware of the reporters still lingering nearby. Thank you, she said finally, climbing into the vehicle. At her apartment, Theo was waiting, pacing her small living room. He looked tired, his usual polished appearance slightly rumpled, as if he'd been running his hands through his hair all day. You're here, she said, dropping her bag by the door. He crossed the room in 2 strides, wrapping her in a tight embrace. I was worried about you. She let herself lean into him, drawing strength from his solidity. I'm okay, just tired of being stared at like I'm some kind of criminal. Theo's expression darkened. Reed is behind this. The anonymous sources quoted in those articles are almost certainly his people. Can't you sue for defamation or something? We could, but lawsuits take time. By then, the damage would be done. He guided her to the couch, sitting beside her. There's something else, the clinic investigation. It's not just about medication records anymore. They're reviewing every aspect of your father's practice, going back years. Journey felt a chill. Looking for what? Anything they can use, but don't worry. My legal team is with your father now. They'll protect him. The thought of her father being subjected to such scrutiny made Journey's chest tighten with anger. This is all because I sat at the wrong table that night, she said bitterly. If I'd just found the right Marcus, none of this would be happening. Theo took her hands in his. Do you really believe that? That we would have been better off never meeting? The question hung between them, weighted with everything that had developed since that fateful night. No, she admitted finally. I don't believe that. But I hate that my father is suffering because of it, that your company is suffering. They're just things, Journey. The company, the stock price, they'll recover. What matters is that we don't let Reed win by making us doubt each other. His words resonated with something deep inside her, a certainty that had been growing despite the chaos around them. Whatever happened next, she didn't want to face it without Theo beside her. Their quiet moment was interrupted by Journey's phone ringing, her father, his voice tense. Journey, the investigators have frozen the clinic's bank accounts. We can't access any funds, not even to pay staff. What, can they do that? Apparently, when there's suspicion of financial irregularities, William replied, his frustration evident. It's another delay tactic. Even if we're cleared, the accounts could remain frozen for weeks. Journey looked at Theo, who had heard enough to understand the situation. We'll figure something out, Dad. Theo's here. We'll call you back. After hanging up, she explained the new development. This is getting worse. Without access to funds, the clinic can't operate at all. Staff won't get paid, bills won't get paid. Theo was already on his phone, texting rapidly. I'll have my CFO set up emergency funding through a separate entity. We'll make sure staff are paid and the clinic stays open. Won't that just create more headlines about your involvement? Probably, he acknowledged. But what's the alternative? Let the clinic close, let Reed win? She knew he was right, but the spiral of complications made her head spin. Every solution seemed to create new problems, pushing them deeper into a situation with no clear way out. As the evening wore on, they worked together, Journey calling clinic staff to reassure them about their paychecks, Theo coordinating with his legal and financial teams. It was near midnight when his phone rang with a call he couldn't ignore, his brother Marcus calling from Europe. Marcus, it's late here, Theo said, stepping into the kitchen for privacy. Journey tried not to eavesdrop, but in her small apartment, it was impossible not to hear his side of the conversation. Yes, I've seen the news. No, it's not affecting my judgment. Because this isn't just about me, it's about principles. His voice grew firmer. The board doesn't make personal decisions for me, Marcus. Never has, never will. There was a long pause, then Theo's voice softened. I know you're worried, but I know what I'm doing. She's worth it. Worth all of it. The simple declaration made Journey's heart swell. Despite everything, the scandal, the business implications, the family concern, Theo still believed she was worth fighting for. When he returned, his expression was troubled. The board is calling an emergency meeting tomorrow. Reed has been approaching members individually, suggesting I've become distracted and emotionally compromised. Could they remove you? Journey asked, alarmed. Technically, yes, but it would take more than Reed's insinuations. I still have majority support. He sat heavily beside her. But this is exactly what he wants, to force me to choose between the company and you. And if it comes to that choice? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Theo's gaze was steady. There is no choice, Journey. I built Maddox Innovations and I'm proud of it. But a company is just a company. What we have, he gestured between them. This is rare. This is worth protecting. The certainty in his voice both thrilled and terrified her. No one had ever put her first like this. Not a man with so much to lose. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, she said, practical despite the emotion choking her. One step at a time. First, we make sure the clinic stays open. Then we deal with the board meeting. Theo smiled, a genuine smile that lightened his tired features. Always the pragmatist. It's one of the things I love about you. The word hung in the air between them. Love. He hadn't said it directly, but it was there, almost tangible in the quiet of her apartment. Journey's breath caught. Theo, you don't have to say anything, he said quickly. I know it's fast, and with everything happening, he shook his head. Just know that whatever comes next, my feelings for you are real. They're not going to change because of Reed or the board or anything else. She reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. I feel the same way, she said softly, and that scares me more than anything Reed could do. They stayed like that, connected and quiet, until exhaustion finally claimed them both. Falling asleep in each other's arms felt like the most natural thing in the world, a small haven of peace in the storm surrounding them. Morning came too quickly, bringing with it new challenges. Theo left early for the board meeting, pressing a lingering kiss to Journey's forehead before he went. Whatever happens today, he told her, remember that Reed only wins if we let him come between us. She nodded, trying to project a confidence she didn't entirely feel. Go show them who's really in charge. After he left, Journey prepared for her own battles. She had decided to go to the clinic despite her father's suggestion that she stay away until the media frenzy died down. She wouldn't hide, wouldn't let Reed or anyone else make her feel ashamed of her relationship with Theo. The security team Theo had arranged escorted her from her apartment to the clinic, where a small group of reporters had gathered. She walked past them with her head high, ignoring their shouted questions. Inside, she found her father in conference with two of Theo's lawyers. William looked up as she entered, relief washing over his tired face. Journey, I wasn't sure you'd come. Of course I came, she said, hugging him tightly. This is our fight too, not just Theo's. William introduced the lawyers, who explained the strategy they were implementing to combat the investigation. It was complex legal maneuvering, but the essence was clear. They were challenging the basis of the investigation itself, arguing it was a targeted attack rather than a legitimate regulatory action. What about the frozen accounts? Journey asked. Mr. Maddox has arranged emergency funding, one of the lawyers explained. Staff will be paid, and essential operations can continue until we get the accounts unfrozen. The solution was exactly what they needed, but Journey couldn't help worrying about how it would be perceived. More evidence of Theo's interference in clinic matters, more ammunition for Reed. As if reading her thoughts, William squeezed her shoulder. We needed help and he provided it. There's no shame in that. I know, she agreed. I just wish it didn't create more complications for him. Her father studied her face. You really care about him, don't you? This isn't just gratitude or attraction. It's more than that, she admitted. Much more. William nodded, a small smile softening his serious expression. I can see that, and for what it's worth, I think he feels the same. The way he looks at you, it reminds me of how I used to look at your mother. The comparison made Journey's throat tighten with emotion. Her parents' relationship had been the gold standard in her mind, a partnership of equals built on deep respect and abiding love. He's at a board meeting right now, she said. Reed has been lobbying members to question his leadership because of his involvement with us. And if they turn against him? William asked gently. He says it doesn't matter, that I'm worth it. She shook her head, still amazed by his certainty. But his company is his life's work, Dad. I can't let him lose that because of me. That's not your decision to make, Journey, her father said firmly. Theo is a grown man who understands the stakes. If he says you're worth it, believe him. The wisdom in her father's words settled something inside her. He was right. She couldn't make Theo's choices for him, couldn't protect him by pulling away. All she could do was stand beside him, face whatever came next together. The morning passed in a blur of activity as they implemented the lawyer's strategy. Journey helped coordinate with staff, reassuring them about their jobs and paychecks. By early afternoon, there was cautious optimism that the tide might be turning. The media presence had thinned, and word came that several key community figures had spoken out in support of Dr. Harris and his clinic. Journey was organizing patient files when her phone rang, Theo's number. "How did it go?" she asked immediately. "The board meeting." His voice was oddly calm. "It went exactly as Reed planned." Her heart sank. "What does that mean?" "It means that as of 20 minutes ago, I am no longer CEO of Maddox Innovations." The words hit her like a physical blow. "They fired you." "They can't do that. It's your company." "Technically they can. It's a publicly traded company now, not just mine." He paused. "But that's not what happened. I resigned." "You what?" Journey couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Theo, why would you do that?" "Because Reed gave the board an ultimatum. Either I end my relationship with you and withdraw all support from the Harris Clinic, or he would release documentation suggesting I had misused company resources for personal matters." "That's ridiculous. You haven't misused anything." "The truth doesn't matter in these situations, Journey. The perception does. A public fight would damage the company, delay the healthcare technology launch, and ultimately hurt the people who need it most. So you just gave up?" The Theo she knew wouldn't surrender so easily, especially not to Alexander Reed. Not gave up, made a strategic decision. There was something in his voice she couldn't quite identify. Not defeat, but something else. "Reed thinks he's won. Let him think that for now." Confusion replaced her shock. "I don't understand." "I can't explain everything over the phone. Are you at the clinic? I'm heading there now." "Yes, I'm here with Dad and your lawyers." "Good. I'll be there in 20 minutes. "And Journey?" "Everything's going to be okay. Better than okay, actually." The confidence in his tone was so at odds with what he'd just told her that Journey couldn't make sense of it. How could losing his company be better than okay? When Theo arrived at the clinic, the change in him was immediately apparent. Instead of looking defeated, he seemed energized, almost liberated. He greeted William warmly, then pulled Journey into a brief embrace. "Let's talk in your father's office," he suggested, including both of them in his gaze. Once the door closed behind them, Theo's expression grew serious. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. Not yet." William and Journey exchanged glances, then nodded. "I've been planning an exit from Maddox Innovations for months," Theo revealed. "Long before I met you, Journey. The company has grown into something I never intended. Too corporate, too focused on shareholder value instead of innovation." "But it's your life's work," Journey objected. "It was," he agreed. "But in the last few years, it's become something else. The healthcare technology division is the only part that still feels true to my original vision." William leaned forward. "So what happens now?" "Now Reed thinks he's won. He thinks I've been ousted, disgraced, separated from my company." A smile played at Theo's lips. "What he doesn't know is that I retained all rights to the healthcare technology in my resignation agreement." Understanding dawned on Journey's face. "You let him have the company but kept the part that matters most." "Exactly. And not just the technology, the entire division, including the team that developed it. We're spinning off as a new entity, Maddox Health Solutions." The strategic brilliance of it took Journey's breath away. "So while Reed is celebrating his victory, I'm launching exactly what he wanted to prevent, but without the corporate constraints that were slowing us down." Theo turned to William. "And the first implementation site, if you're willing, would be the Jackson Ward Clinic." William looked stunned. "You still want to work with us? After everything that's happened?" "More than ever," Theo assured him. "What Reed did, targeting your clinic, freezing your accounts, it just confirmed how important community-based healthcare is, how vulnerable these essential services are to political and financial pressure." The passion in his voice reminded Journey of why she'd fallen for him in the first place, his genuine desire to make a difference, to use his resources for good. "The investigation," she said suddenly, "won't it interfere with implementing the technology?" "That's the other piece of news," Theo replied. "The health department is withdrawing its investigation, Apparently, an internal whistleblower revealed that the complaint originated from Reed's office, with documentation that was later proven to be selectively edited. William's eyebrows shot up. A whistleblower in Reed's organization? That's convenient timing. Theo's smile was enigmatic. Reed isn't the only one with connections. Let's just say that his assistant has been increasingly uncomfortable with his ethical lapses. Journey shook her head in amazement. So it's over? Just like that? The investigation, yes. The media attention will take longer to die down, especially after today's board meeting. But without new developments to feed the story, it will eventually fade. For the first time in days, Journey felt hope replacing the constant anxiety. The clinic would survive. Theo's vision for healthcare innovation would continue, and their relationship had withstood Reed's attempts to destroy it. But one question remained. What about you? She asked Theo. Are you really okay with leaving the company you built? His expression softened as he looked at her. More than okay. For years I've been so focused on growing Maddox Innovations that I lost sight of why I started it in the first place, to solve real problems, to make a difference. This new venture brings me back to that purpose. He took her hand. And meeting you reminded me that there's more to life than boardrooms and stock prices. The sincerity in his eyes made her breath catch. This wasn't just about business strategy or outmaneuvering Reed. It was about Theo reclaiming his own path, one that aligned with his true values. William cleared his throat. Well, I think I should check on our patients. Give you two a moment. With a knowing smile, he slipped out of the office. Alone with Theo, Journey found herself struggling for words. I thought, when you called about the board meeting, I thought we'd lost. In a way, Reed did me a favor, Theo admitted. He forced a decision I'd been contemplating for months, made it cleaner faster than I could have on my own. And you're really not upset about leaving the company. The company hasn't been mine in the true sense for years, he said. It became something else, something bigger but less meaningful. This new chapter, he squeezed her hand. This feels right, both professionally and personally. There was something in his tone, a hint of a question that made Journey's heart race. Personally, Theo took a deep breath, suddenly looking nervous in a way she'd never seen before. Journey, these past weeks have been chaotic and difficult, but they've also shown me what matters most. Who matters most? He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. I'm not proposing, not yet, that would be too fast even for us. Relief mingled with curiosity as she watched him open the box. Inside was not a ring, but a delicate gold bookmark, engraved with familiar words. What is essential is invisible to the eye. From The Little Prince, she whispered, recognizing the quote from one of their earliest conversations about books. I had this made weeks ago, Theo admitted. After our first real date, I wanted something that would remind you of me whenever you read. He held it out to her. It's also a promise that whatever chapters come next in our story, I want us to read them together. Journey took the bookmark, running her finger over the engraved words. It was perfect, thoughtful, personal, connected to their shared love of literature. It's beautiful, she said softly. Like you, he replied, his voice low. Journey Harris, I know our beginning was unconventional. I know there are still challenges ahead, but I also know with absolute certainty that sitting at that table with you was the best mistake I ever made. She looked up at him. This man who had upended her carefully ordered life and shown her possibilities she'd never imagined. It wasn't a mistake, she said finally. It was fate. Theo smiled, drawing her closer. Fate? Coincidence? Divine intervention? I don't care what brought you to my table that night, I'm just grateful it did. As his lips met hers, Journey felt the last of her doubts melting away. Their worlds might have seemed separate once, the billionaire and the bookstore employee from different backgrounds with different resources. But together, they'd created something new, something that belonged to them alone. Outside the office window, the afternoon sun cast a golden light over Jackson Ward. The clinic bustled with activity, staff moving with renewed purpose now that the cloud of investigation had lifted. William Harris stood at the nurse's station, watching his daughter and Theo through the office window, a smile of quiet satisfaction on his face. Alexander Reed's plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of destroying Theo Maddox, he had inadvertently freed him. Instead of separating him from Journey, he had brought them closer together. And instead of delaying the healthcare technology, he had accelerated its development through the new, more nimble company Theo was forming. 3 months later, on a warm summer evening, Maison Bleu was hosting a special event, the official launch of Maddox Health Solutions Community Clinic initiative. The restaurant had been transformed for the occasion, with displays showcasing the innovative technology that would soon be implemented in clinics across the state. At the center of it all stood Theo and Journey, greeting guests and explaining the program. William Harris, now the initiative's chief medical advisor, discussed implementation details with healthcare professionals. Even Mr. Finch from Cornerstone Books was there, proudly announcing that Journey was taking over as the store's new owner, with financing from a small business investment fund Theo had established. As the event wound down, Theo guided Journey through the restaurant, stopping at a familiar spot, table 7, where their story had begun. "I reserved it," he said with a smile, "for old time's sake." Journey laughed as they sat down. "Do you remember how confused I was when I realized I was at the wrong table? And how relieved I was that you stayed anyway," he added, reaching for her hand across the table. The past months had been a whirlwind of change for both of them. Theo had launched his new company to widespread acclaim, focusing on healthcare innovation rather than corporate expansion. Journey had transitioned from employee to owner at Cornerstone Books, implementing her vision for a community literary hub, while still finding time to work on her novel. Their relationship had deepened, strengthened by the challenges they'd faced together. They'd found a balance between their worlds. Nights at the opera followed by weekends at Theo's cabin, charity galas alternating with quiet dinners at Journey's favorite neighborhood restaurants. "I have something for you," Theo said, reaching into his jacket pocket. This time the velvet box he produced was larger, square rather than rectangular. Journey's heart skipped. "Theo, before you panic," he said with a smile, "it's still not a ring. Not yet. I promised to respect your timeline, and I meant it." Curious, she opened the box to find a key, simple, gold, attached to a small compass charm. "It's to the cabin," he explained. "I want you to think of it as yours too. A place where we can escape when the world gets too loud, too demanding." The thoughtfulness of the gift touched her deeply. He understood her need for space, for quiet, for a retreat from the spotlight that now occasionally followed them. "I love it," she said, closing her fingers around the key. "And I love you." The words came easily now, a truth they both acknowledged and celebrated. What had begun as a case of mistaken identity had evolved into the most honest connection either of them had ever known. "One more surprise," Theo said, his eyes twinkling with excitement. "Remember when you told me about your novel, the one about a woman finding herself after loss?" Journey nodded, unsure where this was going. "I showed the chapters you shared with me to a friend who runs a publishing house, just to get professional feedback," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "No special treatment, I promised. And," her voice was barely a whisper, "and she wants to see the full manuscript when it's ready. She thinks it has real potential." Journey. Joy and disbelief competed in her chest. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. Your talent, your voice, they stand on their own. All I did was make an introduction." Tears pricked at her eyes. Unlike his other gifts, the clinic funding, the bookstore investment, this one acknowledged her deepest dream, the one she'd almost given up on. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing he would understand all the emotions behind those two words. As they sat at table 7, hands intertwined across its polished surface, Journey reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From mistaken identity to genuine connection, from suspicion to trust, from two separate worlds to one shared life. Outside the restaurant windows, Richmond continued its evening rhythm, cars passing, people walking, lives intersecting in countless unseen ways. Somewhere out there, other couples were meeting for the first time, perhaps sitting at the wrong tables, perhaps discovering connections they never expected. But here, at this table meant for two, Journey and Theo had found something rare and precious, a love that had survived scrutiny and scandal, that had grown stronger through challenge, that promised a future neither could have imagined alone. "Two mistakes worth making," Theo said softly, raising his glass. Journey smiled, touching her glass to his. "And to the tables that bring us together." In the warm light of Maison Bleu, surrounded by the echoes of their beginning, they sealed the toast with a kiss. Not an ending, but the continuation of a story still unfolding, page by page, chapter by chapter, together. The end.